My mom's worked in an office for over 13 years, so this stories hit close to home. This isn't just content for the views, it's about real experiences people go through every day. I hope you see a bit of yourself in this and maybe avoid some painful mistakes. And of course, all names, companies, and addresses have been changed.
Friday, 4:15 p.m. The Teams call clicked on. 3 small windows appeared. HR, the COO, and my director, David. I'd known David since his first day, fresh out of grad school, back when he shadowed me through client briefings with a legal pad and questions. Today, he wouldn't even look me in the eye. "This just isn't working anymore," he said, voice like someone reading out loud from a policy binder. I could tell he was trying to sound decisive. It landed somewhere between rehearsed and robotic. The HR rep, Janine, I think, offered a soft, apologetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We've decided it would be best if you resigned. If not, we'll proceed with termination." It was the kind of line you expect in a cheap courtroom drama. Not after 22 years of loyalty, of weekend crisis calls, red eyes for acquisitions, hundreds of hours I'll never get back. But I didn't argue. I didn't ask for reasons or pretend to negotiate. That part of me had died slowly over the past 2 years, bled out by undercutting promotions, silent meetings, and the way people started avoiding eye contact in the hallway. I opened the chat window, typed, "I hereby resign, effective upon final reconciliation." Pressed send. Then I logged off without waiting for a response. No raised voice, no emotional plea, no need. Hey, quick pause. If you're already caught in this story, do us a favor. Tap the subscribe button and like the video. 97% of listeners never do, and it really helps the team keep bringing these to life. All right, back to it. I shut my laptop. The screen dimmed to black, and for a long second, the silence felt louder than the call itself. No follow-up email, no HR exit packet, not even a calendar invite for an exit interview. They thought it was over, that I'd just walk away. But I never left things unfinished. And final reconciliation wasn't just a phrase, it was a fuse. They didn't know it yet, but the countdown had already begun. 2 years before that call, back when I still believed loyalty would be recognized, I started a file. I didn't label it anything dramatic. No revenge folder or ominous titles. Just a clean spreadsheet titled Reconciliation Ledger. Every time they pushed my bonus to next quarter, I added a line. Every travel reimbursement delayed, every approval request ignored, every project I handed over only to see someone else's name on the credits. I logged it. Dates, emails, attached PDFs. Not because I was angry, not then. Just because I'd learned that silence and memory don't hold up against systems designed to forget you. When the company went through the merger with East Bay Dynamics, I was asked to help redline some of the internal policy language. They didn't realize I'd worked on M&A integration terms during my second year. I was the one who caught the mismatch in the equity vesting language. I fixed it, quietly. And while I was in the document, I added something small. Appendix C, titled Resignation Reconciliation Procedure. It read, "Resignation finalization is contingent on full reconciliation of all outstanding and deferred compensatory instruments, including but not limited to performance bonuses, travel and development stipends, unpaid equity, and retention agreements, per employee ledger." No one noticed at first, but legal did eventually review it during a rushed Q4 audit when East Bay's legal counsel flagged inconsistencies between departments. They cleared it, signed it. Standard merger language, they said, just procedural housekeeping. And with that, the clause became law. The file lived on the shared drive, buried 2 folders deep under Compliance, Legacy Transition. It had the date of its creation, the edit history, the metadata, all clean, all traceable. I never mentioned it, but I kept adding to the ledger, quietly, methodically. That file wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about teaching anyone a lesson. It was a ledger. And now, 2 years later, that clause, Appendix C, was active, waiting. I didn't send a goodbye email, didn't post some polished paragraph on LinkedIn about new chapters or unexpected transitions. I didn't call anyone from the office. The silence was intentional. Instead, I opened my inbox and archived everything. 12,000 emails across 7 folders. Every thread involving compensation approvals, bonus delays, denied expense claims. Audit requests I'd fulfilled. Approvals I'd never received. I exported them all, dated them, saved backups in a personal vault, not to make a scene, just to preserve the facts. Next, I exported every timesheet I'd submitted over the last 6 years. The ones that showed weekends, holidays, overnight shifts masked as urgent compliance support. Pulled down a mirror of the compliance audits I ran quarterly, most of which never made it to the reports they presented to the board. I didn't alert anyone. I didn't submit a final packet. I forwarded a single PDF to the legal department. Subject: Section 7.4, Final Reconciliation Pending. Message: awaiting review and confirmation. That was it. No explanation, no follow-up. Then I got to work on something I had been preparing quietly for months. I opened the registration form for an LLC I drafted under my married name, different from what the company had in their systems. The firm name was simple: Arkwood Strategy. Registered it as a consultancy in Delaware, filed the paperwork, paid the fee. Then I reached out to 2 clients I'd worked with for years. Both of them had started pulling back from our company anyway, frustrated with slow rollouts and canned responses. I didn't pitch them anything. I just asked if they'd like to explore a smoother path forward. No pressure, no names used, just questions and a timeline. 3 days later, I filed retention letters, quietly, through encrypted channels, legal, ethical, airtight. I didn't slam a door or leave a mess. I just stopped holding up the walls they didn't know were mine. By the morning of day 3, the cracks had started to show. I hadn't touched a line of code, hadn't blocked anyone, hadn't tampered with a single credential. But structure, real structure, always reflects who built it. And they'd built the new tower on top of systems I'd spent years holding together. Payroll was the first to notice. I got a confused message from someone I barely remembered. Some junior analyst trying to reconcile vesting logs with active contract status. Unprocessed stock grants are still showing under your profile. Did someone forget to finalize your termination? I didn't reply. An hour later, finance attempted to close out my ledger, probably assuming my file would archive like every other departing employee, but it didn't. The system returned a flagged error. Reconciliation incomplete. Final payout locked per policy clause. The thing about enterprise tools is, once you tie a legal clause to a back-end trigger, it just obeys. That clause from Appendix C, it wasn't just in a file. It had been hard-coded into the HRIS payout workflow 3 years earlier, standard practice for legacy compliance roles with deferred equity exposure. I knew because I wrote the framework. They couldn't finalize my payout, couldn't close my file, couldn't even trigger the end-of-service automation. The box wouldn't check itself. Then I started getting pinged, first from a friend on my old team, then another. Hey, did you revoke dashboard access? I hadn't, but one of the compliance overlays we'd built was still bound to an authorization token tied to my old profile. The access protocol hadn't expired because technically, legally, I hadn't left. Not until reconciliation concluded. They tried resetting it, but the override had been linked to a second-level approval path, which required a compliance officer's sign-off. That role hadn't been reassigned, because I'd built it as non-transferable without reconciliation. At noon, legal finally reached out. Short email, no subject line. Can you clarify, when does reconciliation conclude? I replied in one line, when your obligations match mine. No threat, no bluff, just an echo of the clause they'd cleared and forgotten. I hit send, then turned back to my own systems, ones they no longer touched. Day 5 started quietly. No new messages, no legal follow-ups, no alerts. I assumed they were regrouping or scrambling. Either way, I kept my phone nearby just in case. At 3:12 p.m., it rang. Unknown number, but the area code was familiar. New York, Lower Manhattan. I let it buzz twice before answering. Ms. Kerrigan, the voice said, formal and measured. This is Thomas Granger with Ellison and McLean. I represent your former employer in matters pertaining to severance and transition. I didn't respond right away, just waited. He continued. We're reviewing your resignation terms, and we noticed you specified effective upon final reconciliation. Would you be willing to clarify what that means? His tone was polite, but tense. The kind of polished uncertainty lawyers use when they know a line was missed and the gap might be expensive. I was already at my desk. I opened the clause. Certainly, I said. Let's walk through it. I read it aloud, slowly. The resignation is not final until all outstanding and deferred compensatory instruments are reconciled. I paused. That includes deferred compensation from 2019 to 2022, bonuses marked pending release in Q3 and Q4 last year, travel stipends that were frozen during the merger integration freeze, and all retention rights under Program 17C. He said nothing. I could hear keystrokes, probably notes being taken or a frantic review of the documents I was referencing. There's also a provision, I added, that reconciliation shall be verified against the board's annual audit logs before considered complete. The typing stopped. Total silence. I waited. He cleared his throat once, then said, "We'll need some time to review all of that." "Take all the time you need," I said. I didn't rush, didn't gloat, just let the words settle. He thanked me. We ended the call, and I closed the file. There was no need to raise my voice when the clause did all the speaking. The audit team got dragged in before sunrise. Someone in legal must have pulled the old equity grant from the 2017 acquisition, the one no one bothered to fully repaper when East Bay merged into our structure. I remembered that grant. I'd flagged it at the time for having outdated deferral language, but no one had followed through. So during the integration cycle, I patched it myself. Quietly updated the clause structure, relinked it to the new bonus protocol, and nested it under my own equity schedule. They signed it without question, one of 100 documents in the stack. Now, 6 years later, it was still active and enforceable. The moment the attorney confirmed the reconciliation clause existed, and worse, that it had been countersigned by the company's then CFO, the panic started. I wasn't in the room, but I know how that kind of fire spreads. Internal systems froze up across finance. Final payout approvals failed to execute. Every attempt to push a vesting event for Q1 equity triggered a compliance halt. Dozens of records were trapped in suspended states. Deferred comp pending my acknowledgement, but no acknowledgement available, because I hadn't signed anything. The CFO was pulled in directly, not a proxy, not a deputy, him. And once he saw the file, saw the active clause, saw the audit logs I'd tied it to, logs that had already locked in discrepancies they could no longer revise. He understood. Bonuses couldn't be issued. Equity couldn't be cleared. No new grant cycles could begin, because every active structure was still anchored to mine. They tried to issue manual overrides, but I had required board audit verification on all deferred payouts tied to merger consolidated comp, which meant they'd have to amend minutes, reopen audits, rebuild logs, or wait until I signed off, which of course I hadn't and wouldn't. There were no calls, no emails, no direct outreach, just silence from me and chaos from them. While they scrambled behind blackout dashboards and frozen payout queues, I moved forward, quietly, cleanly. A vendor I'd worked with for years, previously a supplier through our firm, reached out. They'd lost traction after we pulled their licensing budget last year, part of a short-sighted cost realignment initiative from upper execs. But I remembered their system, their team, their ethic. They remembered mine. We met once, privately, then again, off-site. No one from my former company knew. There was no reason they should. They showed me their roadmap, what they were trying to build now that they were out from under our old procurement stranglehold. And there, in the middle of their restructuring proposal, was the hole I had seen coming, the exact operational intelligence tools they'd lost when I walked out. They needed structure, continuity, someone who understood layered compliance workflows at scale, someone who could rebuild without the old bureaucracy. They offered equity, a proper advisory role, no title inflation, no politics, just deliverables, clean lines, my architecture from the ground up. I accepted. In 2 weeks, we stood up a leaner framework than what my former employer had paid a consulting firm 7 figures to bungle. The tools ran faster, cleaner, no legacy drag, no locked protocols, just streamlined deployment. That Tuesday, their press release went out. Operational Intelligence Division, now led by external advisor Nathan Cole. I didn't promote it, didn't post it. Didn't send it to anyone. But the clients noticed. Because the tools worked again. The ones who used to call my desk after hours started emailing the new address. Quiet migrations, referrals, nothing dramatic. Same client base, cleaner model. No HR overhead, no COO interference, no slow drip approvals, just the work. Done right. And this time, on my terms. It was almost poetic how it played out. The annual West Coast Compliance and Governance Summit, one of those conferences where handshakes get more attention than keynotes. I'd attended it for years, sometimes as a silent panelist, sometimes just to keep tabs on shifts in policy trends. This year, I accepted a quiet invitation to speak on a panel titled Post-Merger Risk Exposure, What We Miss. The irony didn't hit me until I saw the draft agenda 2 days before the event. There he was, Daniel Huxley, CFO, my former colleague, slated as co-panelist. Same time slot, same room. I didn't pull out. I didn't announce anything either. Just packed my notes and flew down like I always had. Quiet. Prepared. The ballroom was cool and dimly lit, with rows of legal and compliance professionals scribbling into branded notepads, sipping lukewarm coffee from white paper cups. I stood off stage while they introduced us. His name first, mine second. When I stepped onto the stage, I saw him. His jaw didn't drop, but his face said enough. A flicker of recognition, then calculation, then the pale bloom of dread when he realized where this might go. But it didn't. Because I didn't say a word to him. Not before, not after, not even during. We took our seats. The moderator launched into questions about acquisition risks and overlooked clause structures. I answered mine cleanly, offering best practices and frameworks, never naming names, never referencing the clause. He spoke in vague terms, sidestepping every mention of legacy grants or transition frameworks. His answers were correct, but brittle. Then came the Q&A. Someone near the front stood and asked, "What's one key lesson you've learned from recent executive departures? Anything you'd approach differently?" You could hear the shift in the room. He froze for just a moment, then tried to recover. "Legal clarity," he said finally, voice thinner than usual. "That's the key. Making sure exit terms are fully reviewed in advance." He didn't look at me when he said it. I didn't comment. Didn't even turn his way. I just nodded once. That was enough. 3 weeks passed. Not a word. No outreach from legal. No last-ditch calls from HR. No quiet messages from anyone still inside. Just the usual corporate silence, the kind designed to wait you out, wear you down, make you forget what you're owed. They must have assumed it was over. That I'd moved on. That I wouldn't come back to tally the debt. But I don't forget. I waited until the quarter closed. Until the CFO had to file the executive compensation disclosures and the bonus reports were locked. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon, I sent one email. Subject: Final reconciliation, completion conditions. Final reconciliation complete upon payment of attached. Attached was a single PDF. Line 1, accrued performance bonuses from FY21 and FY22, deferred per internal scheduling, with timestamps and board memo references. Line 2, deferred compensation as outlined in Section 14B of the Legacy Retention Program, validated with audit log excerpts. Line 3, interest calculated per state statute on delayed compensation, compounded quarterly. Line 4, transition consulting fee per contractual engagement triggered by post-resignation compliance handoff. Subtotal, $1,113,400 interest and fees, $46,600 total. Due, 1.26 Samar. I included a payment address and bank routing instructions. No explanation, no summary, just the facts. 4 days later, the wire arrived. No reply, no apology, no message from legal, just the transaction record. I never responded. They'd offered me termination. I accepted leverage.
바람만 안 불었으면 좋겠다. 궁금하잖아. 원이야. 궁금하잖아. 뭐냐면 아침에 7시에 일어나서 씻고
원희 물결표님이 역시 바람의 아들 키움.
그러게. 오늘 그 갯바위 간다 그랬잖아. 그러니까 주차를 하고